Now, Foreign Affairs Minister John Baird appears to have softened his suggestion of punitive action in response to the vote giving Palestinians non-member observer state status in the UN. Mr. Baird now says the Harper government has no immediate plans to slash aid to the Palestinian Authority. Instead, Ottawa will watch to see what the Palestinians do next. Yesterday, we heard from Palestinian peace activist and independent legislator Mustafa Barghouti and Deepak Obrai, the parliamentary secretary to Mr. Baird. Both weighed in on where things now stand between the Israelis and Palestinians. Today, we're joined by Israeli Knesset member Einat Wilf. She's the chair of the Centrist Independence Party and a member of Israel's Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee. Einat Wilf is in Tel Aviv. Good morning.
Good morning.
How has the landscape changed in the wake of the UN vote and the fighting in Gaza?
It's difficult yet to assess, and these are very different landscapes. I think the fighting in Gaza actually led to some very beneficial consequences strategically, even if they were not planned or intended initially. Iran has been weakened in the Gaza Strip as it has come under stronger control of Hamas. Hamas is now closer to Egypt and less to Iran. Egypt emerged, at least in this context, as a moderating force. So in that respect, I think we actually had some very beneficial strategic consequences from the Gaza fighting, and hopefully also the ceasefire will hold, which would be beneficial, of course, for all. In terms of the vote in the UN, that truly remains to be seen. I think this is an issue that is kind of taking place and we'll see over time. It could go in very many directions. One direction, one which is clearly negative, is that this would merely continue the process of taking the conflict to the diplomatic and international arena. One view says at the end of the day, the Arabs, the Palestinians have been fighting Israel, have been fighting Zionism for more than 100 years. They have failed to do so by violent means. They have transferred the conflict into diplomacy, social networks, media, but the aim has not changed. If that is the case, and that is clearly a possibility, obviously we won't see much change, just a change in the tactics and means by which the conflict is waged. If by some miracle this diplomatic victory would give the Palestinians a sense that allows them to go back to the negotiating table, maybe with a sense of pride, then maybe we could see something beneficial coming out of it. I admit that I'm more skeptical, but certainly that would be a very beneficial outcome.
You sound like you're weighing all of the points here. Where do you stand on this? Are you concerned, or were you against this, along with the Israeli government?
Personally, I'm very much a supporter of the establishment of a Palestinian state. My only concern is that the Palestinians have yet to show that they are able to make the very difficult decisions that are needed in order to establish a real state rather than a virtual one in New York. They tell themselves a story about how Israel was born. There was a UN decision, and presto, Israel was born. Therefore, we will go to the UN and we will be born. They are forgetting that the Zionists have spent 100 years preparing their state before the UN voted for it. And they are also forgetting that at the critical moment when the Zionist leadership was offered the choice, you can have a state, but it will only be on a small part of the territory that was promised to you by the nations. And you will have to recognize that the Arabs in this area have an equal and legitimate right to a state. The Zionist leadership said yes. And they realized that a Jewish state will only come into being by recognizing an Arab one. 65 years later, the Arabs still don't understand that in order to get their state, the real one, they have to recognize that the other one belongs to the Jewish people. We often hear them saying, but we are for a two-state solution. But if you actually push them on the details, they are for an Arab state and another Arab state. They do not respect the original idea of the partition resolution that one state would be Arab and one would be Jewish. If they were serious about it, the recognition of Palestine in the UN General Assembly would automatically and immediately lead to the most logical conclusion, which is that people who are living in the area recognized as Palestine, whose parents lived there and whose grandparents were born and living there, cannot have the status of refugees. They cannot claim that at the same time that they are living in their own state, they also have the right to claim another state. This is precisely going against the idea of a two-state solution.
You're speaking, can I just clarify, you're talking about the discussions around, which have been going on for a very long time, the so-called right of return.
Precisely. There are 5 million Arabs, 80% of whom live in the West Bank and Gaza and are citizens of Jordan, who claim that they are refugees, even though they were born in Gaza, born in Ramallah, born as citizens of Jordan, as well as their parents and grandparents. I can assure you that if 5 million Arabs were to become citizens of Israel tomorrow, there would no longer be a homeland for the Jewish people. And if at the end of the day our destiny is to be a minority, I can assure you that there are better places to be a minority for the Jewish people than right smack in the Middle East.
May I ask you, as things continue to unfold in the wake of that vote, you raise this issue. The other thing that is going on, of course, is the approval of 3,000 more homes in the Israeli settlements in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, minimum 3,000. I guess the numbers change. I don't know what your understanding of the numbers is. What is the justification for doing that now?
I don't think it has been one of our wisest policy. Obviously, this is not a constructive move. And by the way, I can assure you that not a tool shed would be built in the area that is viewed as controversial. These are, in many ways, declarations and nothing more. By the way, most European countries know very well that nothing's going to actually change on the ground. It shows a deep misunderstanding of the root causes of the conflict. The settlements are not helpful, but they're not the reason we don't have peace. Israel has shown again and again that for the cause of peace, whether it was in the Sinai with Egypt or in the Gaza Strip where it exited completely, it can dismantle settlements ruthlessly and effectively. 45 years after Israel is in control of the West Bank, the settlements still constitute only 2 to 3% of the area of the West Bank, most of it close to the border. So we need to understand that there is nothing preventing the establishment of a two-state solution. The only thing that is truly preventing it is the continued rejectionism of the Arab side that in order to have their state, they would finally need to let the Jewish state be. And they are not yet ready to do so. And very few states get it, sadly. Canada is one of the few states that has actually gone deeper into the understanding of the conflict, and it gets it.
I see in the news today that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who is about to meet with Prime Minister Netanyahu, is saying that basically her people are saying that if Mr. Netanyahu does not move forward on some kind of a peace process, that Israel would face international isolation. How do you respond to that?
I view it as a very dangerous view because, first of all, it just talks about the process. There seems to be a general obsession with the process. Well, for the last 4 years, there was a government in Israel that was more than ready to talk, that has taken unprecedented steps to talk, and yet the Arabs again and again said, we will not negotiate because we have a whole set of demands. Negotiations are worthless if you don't know that you're coming out at the end of them with an outcome that is peace and end of conflict. So we need to make sure that if we're back at the negotiating table, we are going to get out of it on the other side with real peace. And for that, we need to seriously ask the question, Are the conditions ripe? Are the Arabs truly ready to accept that the Jewish people are here to stay, that they are not a second-class people in Islam, that they have the right to their own sovereign state, and that the sovereign state will be the only place that they were ever sovereign, even though the Arabs and Muslims view it as holy Muslim land. And as of now, I don't see the willingness to make those decisions.
Einat Wilf, thank you very much for your thoughts on this today and for your perspective.
Thank you.
Einat Wilf is a member of the Israeli Knesset and chair of the Independence Party. She spoke to us from Tel Aviv.